So I've been a fan of Slipknot ever since their self-titled album back in 1999. And that pretty much blew my eyebrows off. And by the time I got around to listening to Iowa, I pretty much needed a whole new face because it had melted. We Are Not Your Kind is the 6th studio album in Slipknot's discography. It has been very well received critically and a little bit more mixed at the moment commercially, from what I've witnessed so far on social media. But not that matters because it has reached #1 in the US and the UK. Wow. And as a bonus, it has knocked Ed Sheeran off the #1 spot. And as an extra bonus, it has annoyed Simon Cowell as well. It is incredible that 20 years later I'm still a huge fan and they're still bringing out great material. I do find that is the beauty of metal in general, is just this sort of perseverance, passion and longevity. So it's a 14-track album with at least 3 or 4 of those being kind of interludes, but you do have sort of 9 or 10 good solid tracks here. I must admit, on first listen I was really disappointed, but after a good another sort of 3 or 4 spins of this album, I am now a huge fan of it. In fact guys, if you were like me where you were disappointed, I would give it another few tries. I think you will be pleasantly surprised. One thing in particular that does contribute to that is that it is probably their most kind of experimental album, and you will kind of hear a lot of things on this that you wouldn't be sort of used to. But I think once you're more willing to embrace that, you will find that it's just another great release in their discography. In fact, critics have been using the word masterpiece to describe this. I don't even think that word was used when Iowa was out, but that's amazing. I mean, certainly more amongst fans, Iowa has always been considered their masterpiece. I can see why critics would say that. It is a very mature album as far as songwriting, instrumentation, and it does have a good sense of diversification and originality. So this album does feel familiar yet fresh at the same time. It does feel like a natural evolution. In fact, this is more in line with what I would have been expecting after Iowa as a follow-up. So to point out some of the strengths, the first thing that comes to mind is how great Corey's vocals sound on this. Holy crap, they haven't sounded this good since the earlier days. Another noticeable strong element on this is the heaviness of the guitars and the drums. Like Corey said, they were aiming for Iowa levels of heaviness on this, and they certainly did deliver on that promise. It's great that they've recaptured that sort of meaty production, heavy guitar tone and aggression. Maybe not in its entirety, and it certainly isn't relentless as their first 2 records, but it still is a welcome return to their sort of core signature sound. My biggest problem on this album is just some of the way that Corey delivers some of those clean sung choruses. He still seems to have a lot of sort of Stone Sour influence, and I think he just needs to get away from that. And just some of the lighter parts don't really mesh that well with some of the heavier parts. I mean, just think about the delivery of some of their earlier tracks like Wait and Bleed, Left Behind, Duality, My Plague. Even though those songs have been considered their more softer tracks, they never really compromise on their just pure badassery. I get that they're trying a sort of different approach here and there, but sometimes it just sounds a little underwhelming. Also, I think the interludes are a little bit pointless on this album. They only sort of serve to interrupt the flow of the album, I think. I won't go into too much detail on the interludes. I'll only sort of talk about the full-length tracks. So first you have Unsainted, which was released as a single and has generally been well received across the board. I think this will definitely become a popular song for them to perform live. It has that typical Slipknot sort of groove to it and has an amazing transition from verse to chorus and is very catchy. It seems like kind of personal song lyrics wise, and it's just a great opener. So Birth of the Cruel takes things in a completely different direction. Well, that is one thing I do love about this record, is just the sort of diversification, and apart from the interludes, it's very consistent as well. The song has a very slow and heavy sort of tempo to it. I can imagine them performing this live and the whole crowd just doing this really slow sort of headbang to it. That would be awesome. So Nero Forte has that more sort of recent Slipknot sound to it. In fact, this wouldn't have looked out of place on the Grey chapter. It has a thrash metal-esque sort of riff to it, and the chorus to this is quite interesting as well. Corey is going for a more sort of higher tone, but it is also interlaced with a sort of really sort of rapid and aggressive vocals on top of that as well, which works nicely and gives it that contrast. So Critical Down is where I run into my first problem. You know, like I mentioned before, with the sort of just the way the chorus is delivered. But on the other side of the spectrum, Corey's vocal delivery in the verses is very impressive. So Elias Funeral is a great example of hearing Corey's emotion on this album. Then you have Red Flag, which is one of my favourite songs because it is just pure Slipknot. Great song. So Spiders is definitely the biggest departure from their sound, but I still like it nevertheless. It is very original, and I do love the horror-esque piano part at the beginning. I wouldn't be surprised if this didn't end up on a soundtrack of a horror movie. Then Orphan is my absolute favourite song. I would love to get up and mosh to this in the club. Actually, not only my favourite song on this, but I think one of the best Slipknot songs in a good while. So My Pain has some interesting instrumentation, but it is very overly long for what it is. It does feel like it's there just to sort of pad the album out and just doesn't do it many favours. Not Long for This World is a bit of a slow burn, but still a pretty decent track. This is a good example of how Slipknot doesn't necessarily need to write blistering 100-mile-an-hour songs every time in order to sound good. In fact, some of their more slower songs are more powerful than some of their more heavier ones. Additionally, this does serve as a nice little segue to what we are true to at the end, and that is Solway Firth. This song is just 100% Slipknot, and it was just so refreshing to hear that. Not only that, but just amazing for the album to end on such a high note and to go out with a bang. I've yet to decide whether I prefer this to the Grey Chapter, because I did love that album. So yeah, at the moment they are both fighting for third place. For me, it's definitely better than All Hope Is Gone and Subliminal Verses, but not quite up there with Eyewear or their self-titled album. So yeah, like I said, this and the Grey Chapter are fighting for third place. Maybe I should just listen to them back to back and then decide. But yeah, I think I'll need a few new ears after that. So those are my thoughts on We Are Not Your Kind by Slipknot. What did you think of the album? Where would you rank this amongst their discography? Do you find this one of their best, one of their worst, or are you still unsure? And also, were you initially disappointed like me and took you a good while to warm up to it? But for now, thank you so much guys for watching, and I will catch you soon.